No, very far.
Can you hear me now?
Now, yes.
Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. It's been such an interesting start to our episode 28. Welcome, everyone, and we are most excited to have Laura Caroli with us today. And apologies, my partner in crime, Elisa, is not here. Last minute work stuff, but yeah, we'll make her proud, I'm sure. So, Laura, please, a few minutes, probably more, to introduce yourself and your illustrious career in the European Parliament.
Oh,
Not to
wow.
brag. Don't brag too
Illustrious.
much.
I don't know if you can use that word, but thank you
I
again
just
so much.
did.
Yeah, I won't. Thank you so much for having me. It's very happy to be with you today. We've been working on this podcast, I think, for a few
Yeah,
months even.
it's been in the works for some time, and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
glad
yeah.
you're finally happening in spite
Yeah,
of everything.
it's great, and it's a pity that Alisa is not here.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, yes, I mean, I I posted a bit about my experience in Parliament over the past few months after the AI Act negotiations, and yeah, I was there from the beginning, negotiating on behalf of the Parliament since I used to work for one of the two co-rapporteurs, Brando Benifei, the Italian socialist MEP, who was co-rapporteur, together with Dragos Tudorache, the Romanian Renew one. So my colleague Dan Nikita negotiated with me all the time. First of all, going through, like, we started working on this file, I don't know, January 2022. It was two full years, all the time, 24/7, breathing and dreaming AI Act. First, going through 4,400 amendments, proposing compromises to our very demanding colleagues from all the political groups, and then negotiating with the Spanish presidency and the Commission. The Spanish
Yeah.
presidency, of course, on behalf of the 27 member states. So, yeah, I don't know
That's
how
and
easy it is.
that's and that's gotten kind of heated in the end of it, but we'll get back to that in a moment. But I want you to let me take you back to 2021. I believe in April of 2021, like
Yes.
that's when for the first time this piece of just massive comprehensive AI legislation was introduced. So back then, people were saying it's too soon. What are you guys doing? Pretty much,
Mm.
just what are we talking about here? But the fun fact is that by the end of the trilogues, everybody was like, guys, it can't come soon enough. So
Mm.
going back to 2021, what kind of the first time you heard about it and started, like you said, you started working with it a little later in 2022, but what were your thought on that exactly? Were you involved with AI at some point, or was it just kind of like all new for you?
No, no, absolutely. We were waiting for it. Like, oh God, I have motion sensitive lights here. I'm
At
sorry.
this point, anything can happen. Whatever can go
Okay,
wrong will
whatever.
go fine.
I can continue. So, we had been working on AI already for a while because we had set up this special committee on AI in Parliament, working on every possible aspect, impact of AI in every possible sector, how it works, potential impact on fundamental rights, agriculture, climate, law enforcement, you name it. All this work is available on the website of the parliament still. I mean, we produced a 160 pages report that we negotiated because Brando was the shadow rapporteur, so we had to negotiate even the final report before negotiating the AI Act. So I was finishing that before starting the AI Act. And so, and in the meantime, we knew that the commission had set up this um, committee of this high-level expert group on AI that had produced already very valuable contributions on which the AI Act more or less is based, because the principles, the ethical principles that underpin it, were already present in that work. And listen, funny story that you reminded me of. The day the AI Act proposal came out, I was sick. I had a bad kidney infection. So I was in bed and I was completely knocked out. And then I saw this draft, and it suddenly, it immediately clicked for me. I don't know. Like I had it already very clear, because probably because with Brando we had been working in the internal market committee. So we were dealing with product safety legislation. We had been working on the toy safety directive at the time. We asked for it to be transformed into a regulation. And if you compare the toy safety now regulation and the AI Act, they have exactly the same structure.
Yeah.
So they are also based on, product safety legislation in general. It gives requirements for the product itself, obligations for the operators. So be it the provider in the AI Act, which is normally the manufacturer, and then the distributor, the importer. Then a lot relies on standardization to implement the requirements. There are notified bodies that can certify the product or the AI system, the CE marking to affix, the circulation, the free circulation in the internal market, the market surveillance authorities enforcing it. So it's really, really similar, of course, with the specificities of AI that does much more than risk impacting just health and safety like normal other products. But in this case, we introduced fundamental rights as one of the three things to protect through the safety provisions.
From my experience, I think the fundamental rights aspect it hasn't been discussed enough.
Absolutely.
People kind of, the whole hype, obviously, the whole hype has been about something else: remote biometric identification, manipulative techniques, subliminal techniques, stuff like that. Kind of just the headline grabbing stuff. But the fundamental rights aspect of it kind of has been just omitted at some point.
I mean, if you have a look at, of course, again, to be precise, this is a risk-based regulation, as you know. So there are these 4 levels of risk, and the highest one is the prohibited, the unacceptable risks or prohibited uses. If you look at these, they are all about fundamental rights, basically. So facial recognition, when we think it's impacting fundamental rights too much, that's why we prohibit it, except in some very restricted cases for law enforcement, blah, 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 under very precise safeguards that we had to fight for really one by one of those very small, apparently, safeguards. They cost us a lot during the negotiations. But yes.
When you say to fight for, you mean obviously not literally, but
almost.
We'll get back to that as well. Lobbying was one of the topics I wanted to just briefly touch upon as well, because obviously a lot of companies, big tech companies, were very interested in trying to influence the outcome, and just to dilute maybe here and there. Especially when the whole piece of the draft AI Act had to be updated when Transformers appeared on stage, and generative AI came into and exploded into public consciousness. Nobody was ready for that, so pretty much things got heated from then on as well. So what's your kind, do you have any stories about, you know, who was fighting who when it came to lobbying behind the scenes, so to speak?
So,
Was it like very explicit?
okay, I mean, probably in a different way than one would imagine. Like, because the funny thing there was that indeed the Transformers exploded paradoxically just after the council had published its own, had approved its own mandate, so the general approach that was then their mandate for the negotiations. So they didn't really have much on models. They only had general purpose AI systems, but with something to be detailed in the future with implementing acts. So
It
it
was
was not so.
pretty vague.
It was vague, yeah. Whereas the parliament was still negotiating at the time. So we decided to include something more specific on this. And that's why in the end, we even had 3 articles only dedicated to foundation models. So it was complicated to figure out how to approach this section, let's say, and even after we found our own agreement, our own compromise that is now in the parliament's mandate in the final version. Of course, this had to be negotiated with the council in trilogue, and that's when it became really hard because at first they were pushing it, you know, back. No, it's too soon, it's too early. Yeah, let's wait. And then it became clear that there was this action from Mistral and Aleph Alpha, respectively, in France and Germany. That, I mean, they weren't so strong on us per se, but France and Germany in council were becoming quite vocal, and they signed this non-paper on regulation of general purpose AI models. It got dramatic at some point because when we had on the table a proposal to really regulate general purpose AI models that was quite detailed and all that we were working on. The council came, the presidency, I remember that day, they came and said, listen, we don't have a mandate to negotiate, so we don't know exactly what to do here. We can discuss some concepts, but we don't have a mandate. So the parliament, well, us, me, talking with my colleagues, we decided unanimously to leave the table. Because it was a priority for the parliament to have models regulated as much as AI systems. And sometimes people don't understand why. Like, why did we want to regulate models? Because from models, all the other systems derive. Like, the value chain starts with a model. If you don't pay attention to risk mitigation at model level, then every possible vulnerability, the risk of discrimination, etc., will trickle down in the whole value chain. And then that's what we wanted to prevent, at least to a certain extent. We are not saying that they have to do exactly the same thing as providers of high-risk AI systems, because of course models are broader, they don't have an intended purpose. So providers of those
It
models
can be
cannot
used for any
account.
purpose.
Exactly. So it's very, very difficult to tell them exactly do this and do that, you know. But we wanted to have at least a certain level of responsibility, of due diligence. And so in the end, in the final version of the AI Act, you have this broad list, very high level list of requirements. One that is about transparency, so technical documentation for all models. That includes the part on copyright that has its own micro world around it, of course, because it's a very sensitive topic nowadays. And then, so that's a basic one that normally model providers should already do in normal practices through model cards. I mean, the information that they give to the downstream providers should already be more or less in line with what we demand of them. And then for the top tier that was decided to distinguish from the others, so the models with the highest capabilities would have to do something else. So have proper cybersecurity measures, establish a risk management system, and risk mitigation system especially. So first of all, they need to assess what are the systemic risks that we call, like the top tier, we presume poses a systemic risk. Systemic risk is a concept that exists already in the code of conduct of the Hiroshima process. So it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's the result of an international discussion that was happening at the same time as we were negotiating. So it was fall of last year. It was already present, like, the Bletchley Declaration, the UK Safety Summit also talked a lot about this systemic risks of powerful AI models. And so, I mean, this top tier, so that has to undertake this, to comply with these requirements that we kept very high level, saying then that the industry itself should detail how to do this, to comply with these requirements through this code of practice that can be enlarged to civil society and other stakeholders. By the way, just today, can I mention that I published my first article at CSIS in my new role on the first draft of the code of practice. It's just because we are talking about this. So.
By all means, and we'll include the link to that article. It's already
Okay.
online, right? If it's already online, we'll
Yes,
definitely do that. Yeah, I was at the working group 1 session today. It's addressing copyright and
exactly, because we are
transparency.
part of it. Yes, tell us,
Yeah.
how do you go, if
Oh
you can.
no, I'll tell next time. But what we'll get back to it. What I
Okay.
also wanted to ask you, so going into this, right? I'm very interested in like behind the scene type of stuff because obviously everybody's interested. Going into this 2022, you just started to work on this, like you said, day and night. You didn't really work on anything else besides the AI Act. Were you technical going into this? How deep did you have to go? Like you really had to educate yourself, I would believe, how this technology works and all the nuts and bolts in order to be able to even, I don't know, think about the piece of legislation as complicated as the AI Act. And then I'll ask a follow-up question.
Wow, I've never been asked that. Good question. So, well, of course, when you approach this kind of legislation, you have a huge imposter syndrome throughout. Like, maybe I have it ingrained in me because, I don't know, I'm a woman, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a computer engineer. So all of these factors made a huge imposter syndrome ingrained in me since day one. Okay. But of course, during the work that we did on the special committee on AI, we had the opportunity to really delve into how AI works, like how a neural network is built, how it works, and I mean
Did you
the
have
whole value chain.
consultants? Did you have consultants involved, like at all points?
Yes, absolutely. We had developed in the course of our negotiations, let's say, a small network of trusted people that we could go to for specific issues. there were a couple of technical experts that we would consult. Of course, for me, it would be a certain person. For another group, it would be another person, depending, also on the political sensitivity.
Mhm.
And then we had specific people to consult for industry claims or for the aspects of fundamental rights. I mean, you at some point you more or less know who you can trust on certain topics. And in the meantime, of course, there was the whole problem of the leaks, so everybody interfering in the negotiations a lot. But that's a different story.
Yeah,
But
there were a lot of leaks, and like
oh my god,
the closer it got to the finish line, and I remember it clearly, like December 2023, things got so heated. Like, I mean, at least
yeah.
in my professional bubble, people were following it. Like, I was following it. Like, literally, it was a World Cup series. It was just so exciting, and
Well,
with every leak, with every update from Luca Bertuzzi,
yeah,
first and foremost, he was like the main,
yeah. I know.
the
Don't
main,
tell me about it.
yeah, the main kind of point person for that. But tell me, were you approached a few times, probably for some people, to kind of just be, Laura, please tell us something nobody knows?
For a
It's
leak,
gonna be just very quiet.
journalist,
Yeah, yes.
absolutely, all the time, all the time.
Were they like stalking you at some point?
Almost. Some of them, sometimes they followed us in meetings. Yeah, it was not nice. I can tell you. No, but I
Yeah, good
hated it.
luck.
I don't like leaks. I think, I mean, as much as I value transparency for the public, I think these are very, very sensitive and delicate negotiations. And so you need a safe space in which you have to be able to say certain things, to speak your mind without the fear of being quoted on a paper after 5 minutes,
Yeah.
because it's really
I Yeah, I agree, but from a different angle. I think the leaks, that's what made it like such a blockbuster for like everyone involved, whoever was involved in that
Mhm.
process. Trust me, up until then, not a lot of people knew what trilogues are in the SAP.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. But
So it
I
got
can
people's
also tell
attention and
you,
people started to talk about it.
I can tell you that sometimes I had to correct some of the leaks because sometimes, journalists publish documents as they are, boom, they put it online. Uh, some other times they interpret them, you know, and sometimes they interpret them wrong. So there was at least one blatant case of, I will not name names, but an article um, said we had proposed a compromise, proposing something very negative for companies, for SMEs in particular. So they interviewed SME representatives and they were super alarmed, about this. But the interpretation of the compromise was exactly the opposite of what we meant. And so I had to call them and say, no, you got it wrong. I'm sorry. You are, you know, you are making it dangerous because you are triggering a panic reaction that is completely unwarranted. Like, this is
Yeah.
really not what we are trying to do. So,
Did
I mean,
they did they remove the
they
article?
corrected, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it was wrong, simply
Hmm.
wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
yeah.
talk about traumatic experience for
Oh, you
you
have
on
no
the
idea.
inside, especially the last like 2 days. I believe the final day of the negotiations. You guys finished around it's around like what, 2 a.m. What was that? Like that was like late at night.
Yeah, and it was after 3 days of I don't know, I don't even know. For us, it was like one endless day. But we started on Wednesday lunchtime, more or less, and we finished on Friday night. It was already Saturday, actually. So um, there was, of course, a break in the middle that we asked for, because at some point I looked at my colleagues and they were either sleeping on the desk or they were crying. Others were calling home to check for the kids to go to school. I mean, it was a mess, and we weren't functioning anymore. But
Yeah, I mean,
some negotiators do use this as a technique, to push the
yeah.
interlocutor, and we
I mean,
didn't let them.
it's a well-known torture technique as well. Sleep deprivation, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
and you
Everything is
remember
really
that
waterborne. The trash can
the
picture of
trash
yours.
can. Yes.
I like we were discussing in our prep call, right? That's literally my image, like the image that pops up in my head every time I'm thinking about like those final days. That's what comes to mind. And I remember when I talked to you about that during our prep call. Yeah, that
Yeah.
it's literally that, like the picture says 1,000 words. That's literally
Yeah.
like the depiction of how intense actually things were. Nobody could go, nobody was coming in and out. People were just
Yeah.
basically kept
It,
hostage there
there
until
are
they
there are
made this
techniques,
happen.
there are the Greens, for example, have imported this mate drink from South America that
Mhm.
helps, being alert, like a Red Bull, more or
Yeah, yeah,
less. So you could see a lot of them around, passed around. Like, yeah, it's not drugs, it's all legal.
yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, but
No,
yeah,
I'm
still,
saying
still
this
pretty intense.
for people listening to us. They might wonder.
Still pretty intense. I'm pretty sure a lot of people were not aware of like how bad things actually were in terms of just like how people were feeling, and the
Yeah,
conditions, like the pressure and the deadline that the
yeah.
commission gave itself. Everybody was at some
It
point
was
pretty much thought it was impossible to
no, but
reach.
the thing was that we were at the end of the mandate almost. So yes, the commission was really pressuring us to close. The Spanish presidency really had an interest to close on those days because it was then or never for them. Like they were finishing their semester. So it was then or never. The parliament was the only one which had a little bit more flexibility in timing, meaning that we could have continued with the Belgians a little bit, but not too much, because if we hadn't closed by January or February, I don't remember exactly, we wouldn't have been able to approve it before the elections, you know? And
Mhm.
even like with the timeline we had, as you have seen, like the corrigendum, the plenary vote, the coreper vote, in the end we made it just on time, for it to be finalized before the
Yeah.
elections. So wow, it was really a rush, and indeed, the atmosphere was not nice, especially after the first 22 hours when we asked for the break. We were being forced to accept a compromise that was not a good compromise
Mhm.
for the parliament's priorities, especially in terms of fundamental rights. It was not good, and we had a very broad majority that was unhappy about it, comprising even ECR.
Mhm.
Uh, so we really pushed, and the next day we came back, like we pushed even to leave. They did at first they didn't want to let us leave.
You were fighting fighting them to leave.
Yeah, we
That's
were. I
yeah.
mean, and then when we came back with a long list of demands. Like, in order to sit back at the table, we need this, and that, and that. And at first we thought, oh my God, they're gonna kill us. This list is very long. uh, and then we saw that. I mean, the Spanish presidency took some time aside to really assess the whole list. I was really thinking they're gonna come back and tell us we cannot conclude. And instead, they sat down. Under Secretary Artigas, Secretary of State, she sat down and she said, "Okay, this we can accept. This we can accept if we change this word. This we cannot accept, but this we can accept by adding this." So we saw that there was, the game was open. We
Yeah.
were game. And so from there, the atmosphere started to get much better. And there we really started to listen to each other, because a lot of what happened in the end was a bit of, for me, misunderstandings. Like, at least in two instances, I saw very clearly that both the Commission and the Council were not accepting our proposals because they thought we were going much further than we actually wanted to. So by explaining exactly what we meant with a certain thing, then they were able to listen to us and say, so you didn't mean that. Okay, then we can work on this, let's reword it better, make it clearer. So, yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, I don't blame the Spanish presidency. They did a great job, and they had to really respond to a very thin mandate, very narrow, from the member states, who were interested especially in preserving their powers over law enforcement, national security,
National security. Yeah.
and then protecting model providers in Europe. So these were very big priorities for the member states, whereas the parliament, of course, wanted a bit of the opposite.
Yeah.
So in the end, I don't know how we managed, really, but really, I don't know. Listening to each other in a constructive way was the part that made a difference. And even after this, in the Coreper vote, at first France was trying to get a blocking minority,
Yeah.
as they did for many other files during that period. But in the end, I don't know, they managed to, and the international pressure at that point was so high. Everybody knew that we had found the deal. Like, I remember when we were still in the room, we got a notification from the New York Times, like the seconds after we got the deal. The New York Times had this notification that we had found the deal. So at that point, you cannot just backtrack, no, there is no AI Act. The international pressure, I think, was a key element for the final unanimity vote in Coreper by the member states that were not completely all happy about it. But okay, I mean, it's a
Interesting.
compromise. It's a compromise.
That's so exciting. I mean, for just even me, like, listening to you, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would die to be a fly on the wall during those last days. So, I mean,
a fly.
now you
Yes.
are in the US.
Yes. I
How
arrived
are
really.
things looking? How are things looking from your perspective
So
in the US?
I arrived at the worst possible moment, because it was just before the elections, and I saw it happen, and nobody here seemed to anticipate the
Yeah.
results that way. Really, nobody to that point. And so now everybody's wondering, the future of US AI policy. Of course, we had just finished commenting the National Security Memorandum here, and I was really hopeful, because I really was, analyzing all the documents. Like, again, we all know the executive order, but then the OMB memorandum, and then the National Security Memorandum, and of course, the state bills are still another story that we can also talk about. But there I was really seeing, oh my God, in some points, the US is going farther than the EU. Like
Mm-hmm.
in the National Security Memorandum, there are prohibitions um, by law enforcement, national security agencies, etc., that go further than the AI Act. Like we really
Mm-hmm.
had to fight for each and every word in those prohibitions, and they go just poof, you know, like
That's interesting. That's an interesting perspective because a lot of kind of just the common sentiment that I'm seeing and hearing is Europe regulates, the
yeah,
US innovates.
absolutely.
Europe is shooting themselves in the foot with the AI Act. Oh my goodness, what have they done to themselves? They'll just be, always last when it comes to AI innovation
Yeah,
and
I
stuff like that.
cannot even hear this argument anymore because it cannot be more wrong.
Hmm.
Like, first of all, the EU AI Act doesn't regulate all AI, but just a bunch of AI systems that are in the riskiest areas. So a lot of companies don't even realize this yet because many of them just think, oh my God, we have AI, so we have to comply with the AI Act. Okay, tell me what you're doing with your AI system. Then you talk to them. 90% of the time, they are not in the scope of the AI Act. So I'm sorry, you are not even high risk. What are we even talking about? You don't have to do anything. And then they say, but we want to comply. Okay, sure, you can adhere to a code of conduct in the future. Yeah, okay.
Hmm.
But see, we are not regulating you, so calm down. And then, I mean, we don't want to punish anyone, any company per se. And then we also have one regulation for 27 member states, 450 million people, whereas here in the US, you see state legislation popping up like
Yeah,
mushrooms everywhere, and they are all different, covering
it's
different
very
things.
targeted. Yeah,
Yeah, some
everybody's
is targeted,
addressing
some
their
is,
own.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so companies will have to face this labyrinth of, navigate, what can I do here, what can I do there. So maybe
yeah,
at some point complying with the highest common denominator will be the AI Act. So
yeah. So,
that makes it easy.
so that brings us to the Brussels effect,
Yeah.
the favorite,
Hmm.
favorite topic as of late when it comes to just AI regulation in general.
Mm.
At least that's what I'm saying. Do you see from your perspective right now, as you're based in the US,
Mm.
do you see this Brussels effect taking place or
Mm.
not yet? Because I'm definitely seeing that
Yeah.
it's the AI Act has had an influence. Obviously, a lot of drafters in the U.S. And I'm seeing bills coming up from Texas, the Colorado AI
Mm.
Act,
Yeah.
a lot of other Connecticut,
Mm.
a lot of pieces of proposed legislation. You can definitely tell that the drafters were reading the AI Act and not once and not twice.
Mm. Yeah. Some of them even copy pasted some elements. Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. The
But
definitions. Hmm.
yeah, even the criteria for the high risk classification, the areas of high risk. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's not the same as GDPR. I mean, I don't even. I'm not that interested in seeing whether there will be a Brussels effect. That's not necessarily what we expect, like what we wanted to achieve. We just thought it was right for Europe. We don't claim that anybody else should exactly do the same. So, of course, all countries are entitled to have their own reasoning behind it. But I can tell you, when we did the AI Act, the problem was the very hard part for the commission in the first place, because they drafted the first version, was that there was no precedent. Okay,
Hmm.
so the fact that they had no basis to build on was really a difficulty, and so we were navigating more or less in the dark. Whereas now
Yeah.
legislators elsewhere do have a basis, and if they want, they can get inspired from it. Otherwise, I mean, they can also go another way. But sometimes, it's a good thing to have a basis somewhere else, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It makes it
Yeah.
easier. But of course, it depends also what you want to regulate. Sometimes in the US, for example, through the executive order and everything that came after it, a lot of interest has been among on AI models, like powerful AI models, not narrow, high-risk AI systems. So it's just one chapter of what we did, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have well, we're still kind of on this the substance of the act part. We have a comment here. Can you please define what high risk means as a one of the drafters involved? I mean, yeah, we have the text and there are definitions, but what was the meaning that you guys were
Okay. So
putting
high
into?
risk very basically means that it's first of all, it's not the AI system itself, but it's where it is used. Like, it is used in an area whereby a decision by an AI system can have a significant effect on health, safety, or fundamental rights of a person. So that's what we consider high risk. It doesn't mean dangerous. Okay, it means that in those, let's say, sensitive areas, we think that AI systems should work perfectly when they are really the systems that when they are close to the final decision. For example, if they do just something like, I don't know, improve a text, even if they are in that area, like in law enforcement, they improve the report of a policeman, the AI Act, the AI system, then it's not high risk. We say it in Article 6, paragraph 3. If it does one of these four things, even in that area, it's not high risk. So, for example, improving a text is not high risk. Narrow procedural task is not high risk. Detecting a pattern is not high risk. Why? Because it's far from the final decision. The final decision is where a possible problem, discrimination, can happen. And that's why we consider them high risk, meaning high sensitivity, if you will. It's not risky in the sense that it's dangerous. We just want them to function perfectly when they are used in those contexts.
So back to the US. You mentioned during our call as well how you just mentioned that as well, and that's just me and Elisa commented on that. That's a very interesting perspective, as you said. Like, I didn't expect to see that the US actually came a little further than the AI acted it to some extent. Especially, you mentioned the public sector and how public sector authorities are using this technology. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you read the National Security Memorandum, and it introduces some prohibited practices, like, for example, on biometric categorization, and all that were like, the extent of those prohibitions is greater than the prohibitions in the AI Act. And I think the way this could be done was that it didn't go through a democratic process, because it comes from the really top down, like the administration itself. It's part of an executive order, so it comes from the administration. So whereas in the EU, we had to really negotiate every single thing, not only within parliament, so across the whole political spectrum, but
Mhm.
also among 27 member states that are governed by different majorities. So the whole point was finding a majority and finding, again, a compromise. In the American case with the executive order, you don't have to find a compromise. It's just boom, top down. If there is ever a federal bill proposal that really makes it through Congress, etc., and becomes law, we will see. But it will undergo significant a significant amount of negotiation. So it will not be just
Yeah, top
that
down.
straightforward. And
Mhm.
and to this, I mentioned during our call, I looked at the California bill that was vetoed in September by the governor.
Yes, 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 yes.
When
The
I read that the
the
first time, yeah,
mhm.
what I told you was, oh my God, thank God it was vetoed. Like in the EU, something that harsh on model
Mhm.
providers would never have, I don't know, even have been proposed.
See the light of day.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. I mean, I think for us, who could have proposed that? Like, I don't know, the left. Like, it would have
Mhm.
been really, really too strong. I don't know how it got a majority in the US. I mean, it's crazy for me in California. So
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
where you have the Silicon
California.
Valley, you know. No, I know
Yeah,
that California is very advanced in protecting fundamental
it's been very
rights,
prolific when it
privacy.
comes to AI bills. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
This
But
past September,
it's
they
also
passed quite a lot.
where companies operate. So
The
it's
majority of
crazy.
tech, the biggest tech companies, yeah.
It's
And
crazy
the
for
bill
me to
that you're
think that.
referring to, yeah, it's kind of for our listeners is SB, the infamous SB 1047, obviously, the
Exactly.
AKA the kill switch bill that had a lot of
Yeah.
interesting provisions,
In the
and
AI
that,
Act, you have no kill switch. I'm sorry.
yeah,
We would
and
never have thought of that.
it also borrowed quite a few things from the AI Act. Obviously, the risk-based approach is very, very popular these days. I mean, why wouldn't it be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sensitive approach. I do understand that. I also saw it in the Colorado bill and in several other bills. I see also in Latin America, they are borrowing a lot from the AI Act, more than in the
Mhm.
US, I think.
Yeah.
But
Talking about the global South, since we're on this
mm,
topic, I read this article the other day just while preparing for our talk, and there's this view that a few of the loopholes in the AI Act, they
mhm,
don't address the expert of technology, you know,
mhm,
to
yeah,
other countries, and the global South in that regard is very is at a very precarious point, and
yeah.
literally the experts are worried that this technology might it's going to be like a Brussels effect in reverse,
Can I tell
so to
you?
speak.
I can tell you
Mhm.
everything about it. Like, I personally, I proposed exactly to limit that. You can see it in my boss's amendments to the AI Act. We proposed like all dual use exports of intrusive technologies to be not not to be possible for European companies.
Mm.
Uh, it was hard to find a majority for that. Even after we found a majority for that, just for the prohibited practices, so it was already narrower than what we proposed.
Yeah.
In trilogue, we were told that the member states didn't agree because we would need to change the legal basis of the AI Act by adding international trade to the legal basis that is already formed of two separate parts. So the one on personal data protection and one on internal market. So it would have required losing some time to do this, and not only I mean, they should have agreed to do that. They wouldn't agree because they thought international trade had to be out of the discussion. And I guess that in the end, what made us feel, I mean, at least partially relieved of this loophole is that it's not completely unregulated. Like in Europe, many don't know, but there is a regulation on dual-use export control that basically prohibit exporting technologies that can be used for oppression, for an oppressive regime to repress the population. So one would think, let's hope that this is actionable among member states because they agreed themselves to have this regulation on. The parliament there has less power, but at least it exists. It has been approved. It's the law now in Europe. So let's see if they apply it.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
through this, normally facial recognition, for example, technologies shouldn't be exported.
yeah.
If you interpret it extensively, of course.
I mean, we'll obviously see how things will go from here. We have a few more years, I believe, before we even start to see the
Yeah.
effect of the AI Act. But obviously, starting February 2nd, all the banned, like the all the
Yes,
banned prohibited practices, AI
apply.
practices are, yeah, applied, and I hope companies are thinking about that and conducting their AI impact assessments, hopefully. But
Hmm.
just for kind of my last question to you, and we have 8 minutes. As a person who was working a lot, and that's an understatement, on that piece of legislation,
Mhm.
what would your recommendation be now that you're in the US? And obviously, we're based in the US, and a lot of US based companies are, in my experience, and were up until a certain point, unaware of the extraterritorial effects of the AI Act, that it still applies to them in some situations, be it as when the output is used within the EU. The company doesn't even have to be based in the EU, but that's kind of the common misconception of the US-based companies. So what would your advice be to those companies based in the US, again, in the absence of a comprehensive piece of legislation in the US as well, but what should they pay attention to when it comes to the AI Act?
I mean, of course, to approach it without an excessive concern, but with attention. Um, there are very straightforward paths, to understand whether or not they have to be worried about it. I mean, first of all, be aware of the AI that this company uses, deploys, or provides, so builds or uses. And then, so first of all, what role you have in the value chain, what area, what use case you have for it or for them, because every company uses AI in many different ways, several AI systems. As we know, most probably 90% of them will not even be in the scope, so there is no problem for that. Um, then, of course, there is another issue that we don't talk enough about, but the Commission also put forward the draft guidelines for the definition of AI.
Mhm.
You first need to figure out if your
That's a
system is
tricky
an
one.
AI system. It's a very tricky
Yeah,
one. Yeah, it's a tricky one. So
there are a
that's
lot of
actually
definitions.
the root question. Once you have answered that question, then are you a provider or a deployer?
Yeah.
Is your system high risk or not? Like, are you using AI generated content, or designing a generative AI system? Or are you training an AI model? Is
Hmm.
it a model with systemic risk? So that
Yeah.
what amount of compute does it have? These are very basic questions, but there is a lot of already guidance out there that is maybe not necessarily already official, but there is a lot of very very easy tools that you can find everywhere. Like on my LinkedIn, it's a constant flow of very
Yeah.
very simple cheat sheets for compliance that can really be helpful and clear.
Hmm.
And also get engaged, discuss with regulators whenever there are doubts, because nobody thinks companies have to be left alone in this journey. It's really a process, a
Hmm.
collaborative process. Like you see now with the draft of the code of practice, I'm
Yeah. I
very
was going to talk
happy
about that.
very happy that in the end the commission went for this collaborative approach. The
Yeah.
parliament also pushed, like one of the last things that I did when I was in the parliament was really to push forward this letter my boss sent to the commissioner, asking for a collaborative process, and we convened them to really
Yeah.
push them, please, to have independent chairs and vice chairs. And in the end, this happened. Of course, it was not just the parliament who influenced that, but also civil society itself.
Yeah.
And it was relevant because now you have international observers, you have experts of all kinds, and I think more brains are better than just a few, you know.
I totally agree with you. It's truly, I I believe it's like the first pretty much international effort of this magnitude over
Absolutely.
around 1,000 stakeholders involved, people from literally around the globe, talking
Yeah,
about it, discussing it, getting their input. One of the concerns that I heard are not a lot of tech people are involved in the drafting of the first GPA code of practice. Yeah, a lot of academia, a lot of
mhm.
independent experts like myself, but not a lot of actually companies who are to who are the main target
Yeah.
audience. I would say of
But
the
yeah, I also talk about that in my article. But
Mhm.
indeed, I don't think that's necessarily. I mean, how could it
A
be
bad thing.
otherwise? Because the companies are just a few that produce this, that build these powerful AI models. So I think that Stanford counted them until this summer. They were just 8 within the threshold that we set in the AI Act. So
Yeah.
of course, not many of them are like they are just a small percentage um, over the 1,000 people that are participating, but that's normal. But they will have a dedicated channel, which is this
Yeah.
provider workshop, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
important that they do. But you know, the fact that it's not just them discussing to themselves with the commission taking notes, as it was initially feared. I mean,
Mhm.
it's already a good step, because they will, like, imagine OpenAI talking to Google with the commission taking notes. Like, how do you do
Mhm.
this? I do this, and there are
Yeah.
all these trade secrets around it, So the outcome
Yeah.
wouldn't be the same.
I mean, yeah, the working groups were having sessions this whole week, and I'm in two
Yeah.
working groups, and I've attended two sessions. So tomorrow is going to be the final kind of plenary session. So they'll be discussing just the highlights from what people were talking about. But from my sessions, I would say the main concerns for people are obviously copyright, downstream copyright
Mm.
applications. How can you trace that? How can you address
Yeah.
possible risks when it comes to that? It's literally impossible, right? How can you control how people are using these technologies, general purpose technology. Again, you can use it by, I don't know, generating very silly pictures, and you can use it by generating XAM material, for example, right? So it's a very tricky issue, as well as transparency. The requirement where companies need to document everything and the sources of their training data. Where does it begin and where does it stop? Again, nobody knows, and people are, and the companies and the tech people are worried about that. How can we comply if there's no really one kind of blueprint of how do we go about it? But I believe we'll get there. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But at this stage, yeah, and there were arguments that it's the code of practice. Just the first draft came out last week. It's too vague, pretty much no information. I don't know what people expected at this stage, but to me, it's a start. We'll see, and we'll be criticizing it when it's finished. The final draft to be published, I believe, the 1st of May, 2025. So we still have some time, and then kind of we'll talk about the substance when we have the substance, I would say. But in the meantime, I think it's still better than nothing, and it's great that this initiative has been launched by the EU AI office. So yeah, we'll see, and hope to read your article. I'll make sure I post the link to it.
I mean, you will know already everything about it because you are there. So
I'd love to read it still.
okay,
So
that's nice.
I think that's a wrap for us. We are just we were a tad late, but yeah, it's been a pleasure to have you, and I hope you just come on and discuss other interesting stuff anytime you want. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
I'd love
And
to.
I believe our next talk is Alisa would kill me if I don't mention it. December 5, 2024, and we'll be I'm not gonna say who's gonna be our next speaker, so it's gonna be
Surprise.
Yes, again, Laura, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And I'll see everyone in 2 weeks. Bye.